this episode of Motive Garage, we upgrade the drivetrain in our GR Yaris, as well as test out the Plasma Man intercooler and push for even more power. In our last video on the GR Yaris, you saw we installed the Plasma Man intercooler and the Golby's Parts intercooler kit. Now, we didn't get to test the car straight away, but I did decide before we did any more testing or development, I wanted to upgrade the drivetrain in our GR Yaris. Now, we do find that on hard launches at the drag strip, the factory clutch would slip a little bit. Now, it would come good again and probably would survive for a little bit longer. However, Yaris owners that are more enthusiastic than what I've been have been finding that they are wearing out the factory clutch pretty easily, expected in a modern four-wheel drive car. So I wanted to upgrade the clutch before we did any more development as a preventative maintenance issue. So we worked with Golby's Parts once again because they worked with NPC in Queensland to develop a clutch upgrade kit for the GR Yaris. Now, this clutch still uses an organic clutch plate, but is using more robust material than factory, and the plate itself is also stronger. Now, if you look at the factory clutch plate, you can see the material that joins the inner part to the actual organic material part is really, really thin. And this would very easily warp or distort. Although it works factory, once you start adding more power and torque, this thing looks like it's not going to survive a lot of abuse, that's for sure. The new clutch cover has more clamping force, 25%, to help hold more torque as well. The new flywheel is a billet single piece item compared to the factory dual mass item. Now, going billet single piece saves weight, complexity and cost, but going to a single mass from a dual mass flywheel can increase vibration at low RPM. This is the factory dual mass flywheel. As you can see, the two parts of the flywheel can move separate to each other, but they are quite heavy and generally quite complicated. By having, essentially a moving part in the flywheel gives you essentially another breakage point. So by going to a single mass flywheel, you will find that it's usually stronger, simpler, and cheaper. But you have to remember that when you go from dual mass to single mass, you may get some more vibration down low. But our car has a solid stabilizer mount, has coilovers, a loud exhaust, so we're probably not going to notice. Another thing on the upgrade list was a rear limited slip differential. Golby's Parts came to the rescue again and got us a complete Rally-I rear LSD and diff assembly. Now, we could have just bought the centre, but getting the whole housing means it's a very quick and easy swap, saving on labour and time. But now we also have a spare diff that we can use to either sell or we can use it to try out some other LSD options. Plus, having a spare is certainly pretty handy. Now, I decided to go for a rear LSD only for a couple of reasons. One, money. Rally-I front LSD is over $4,000, and the time taken to install a front LSD, regardless of the cost of the LSD, is pretty expensive. And two, I wanted it to be more of a relatable upgrade for you guys who are watching. Will the rear LSD on its own make a big impact? And my experience from our GC8 WRX is that a rear LSD makes a massive difference, even if you just do it on its own. Now, not many people have installed clutches and LSDs into the GR Yaris in Sydney, so I took it to a dealership. Sounds crazy, right? But the guys at Castle Hill Toyota have a few enthusiasts working at the back, and their 2IC of the service department is actually a 86 race series and Trans Am race series race mechanic and loves working on things like the GR Yaris. Now, they also had all of the workshop manuals that they needed to do all of that swap, so it was pretty straightforward for the guys there to do. So with the new rear diff installed into the car and the NPC clutch having had a few days to settle in, I sent the car off to PowerTune to test out the Plasma Man intercooler and see if we could make some more grunt.
So we're back today to test the Golby's intercooler piping kit and the Plasmaman intercooler that's been fitted to the Yaris. So we've basically installed them onto the car, brought it back onto the dyno and tried to strap it as well as we could to replicate how it was last time, to find out if there's any gains to be had from things such as, pressure drop across the core, cooler intake temps and that type of thing. So from our testing, we've established that at the moment there's a slightly lower pressure drop across the core. In terms of temperature of the core and intake air temperatures. So what we find is that if the car's sitting idling on a dyno with no airflow through the core, we typically find that the inlet air temps can be anywhere up to about 55 degrees. But as soon as we introduce airflow to that core and we actually get some airflow across it, the intercooler is much more efficient than the factory one and we see lower intake temps. We didn't see any massive power increases purely because we're out of turbo. We don't have any more boost to throw at it or any other changes that we can make in terms of mechanically with the engine. At the moment though, what we are able to see is that we're able to perform 6 back-to-back runs at the exact same power level with the same boost, all within a variance of around 0.6 of a kilowatt. So what we're actually seeing is quite consistent results, whereas before it was typically varying quite a large amount. And what we also have found is that moving to the hub dyno, that's where we're able to measure this better. So we've mentioned previously in some of the other videos, the Yaris is very inconsistent on the dyno. Now that isn't aided by the fact that we're using a chassis dyno. There's multiple variables that go into the power figure that comes out on those dynos. They can be things such as tyre pressures, strapping, the tyre actual temperature as well, and grip on the knurling on the rollers. There's a number of different things that play into that power figure. So we were at a point where we were kind of battling the power figure that we were seeing on the screen and the changes we were making in the ECU. So we might add, say for example, 1 or 2 degrees of timing, we might see an improvement in power, and then we could do a second run and we would actually see a decrease in power from that first run. So we weren't able to quantify that, if we put 2 degrees of timing into the ECU, that 2 degrees of timing actually resulted in the power increase. Are we at MBT timing or are we past that? We are unsure. So we made the decision that we would take it off the chassis dyno, we'd put it onto the hub so that we could see more consistent results. And that's what you can see when we've run it back to back. It's across 6 different runs, whereas on the chassis dyno, we were seeing one run at 195 and another at 210. So huge differences in power levels. Moving from the chassis dyno to the hub dyno, we needed to perform another baseline. Now, what that meant is that we're going to take a reading from the chassis dyno, and then we're going to take a reading with no changes at all on the hub dyno so that we can reset and then we can work our power figure from there. So initially on the chassis dyno, we got a power figure of 195 kilowatts, moving directly to the hub dyno, straight on, run it up, and it made 228. So the move to the hub dyno also enabled us to basically further tune the car in spots that we couldn't reach with the chassis dyno. So what we're actually able to do, because the hub dyno is quite consistent, we can add things like 1 or half a degree of timing, and we're actually able to see those results. So today's session, we spent a couple of hours on the hub dyno. After we'd bolted it up, we put some additional timing in there. We made some other adjustments, to do with the fuel timing and other things that exist, in a direct injection motor. And our final result today was 252 kilowatts on the hub. Now, we started at the same boost level at around about sort of 238 to 240 kilowatts. From that, we were able to attain, a 10 kilowatt gain just from the additional tuning that the hub dyno enabled us to perform. With the direct injection, there's a whole array of other things that we can move. So the fuel timing itself, the blending between the primary and the secondary injectors. You've got your standard ignition timing, you have both your inlet and your exhaust camshaft timing. Pretty much everything, can be adjusted in a very small way to see what benefits that, you can actually get from it. So the hub dyno enabled us to do that, and that's why we're able to make the additional power. The sound of a couple of hours on the dyno for 10 kilowatts sounds like a great deal. Now, the reason that this is that you basically have systems that effectively are fighting each other. So if we advance the camshaft timing by 5 degrees, we might have to remove some ignition timing or put some more ignition timing in. There's basically, once you adjust one system, you need to make an adjustment to another, and then subsequently adjust multiple others and kind of chase chase the power. So the final thing that we did on the Yaris, as Andrew asked, we've basically added different boost levels allowed to be switched from the drive mode knob in the center console. So that means that when Susie jumps in the car, she can drive it on, say, 20 pounds. Then Andrew can take it to the track and maybe drive it on 24 or 26, and then go into the drags, put it all in and go 28 pounds and all out. It's now all easily switchable from that drive mode switch in the center console. So that's nothing to do with Susie's driving ability. That's literally just a case of, you don't need 28 pounds in this car to drive around in traffic or around Sydney, anywhere really. Why thrash the car if you don't have to? So the circuit setting, or the 26 pound setting, that's typically in place purely because you're going to be doing more laps. You're going to be hitting the car a lot harder for a longer period of time. Where a drag strip, hopefully the car is only on the drag strip for 11 seconds. Down around a racetrack, you're doing minute and a half laps, and you're doing multiple laps. So you don't really want the car to be at the absolute limit of its power and everything else for an extended period of time. It's not good for it mechanically.
So with COVID restrictions in Sydney right now being rather, restrictive, we can't take the Yaris to any racetracks. In fact, I can't even take it out to my favourite piece of twisty road without breaking the law right now. But what I can show you is streetability. Now, one of the best things we did is we used the four-wheel drive controller to also control the boost map. So in normal mode, it's only on about 20 pound of boost. Now on E85, that is more than, a factory Yaris by a decent margin, but it's not crazy and it tames it down a little bit. And as you can see, it just drives along really well. So I guess you guys probably want to see what sport mode is like first, right? Okay. There you go. Gets to the speed limit pretty quick, doesn't it? It's pretty savage on the launch with the launch control and that sort of power. It is, it launches, you can put the T in GR if you really want to. If you get it exactly right, it's pretty good. But that, honestly, any surface, any time, use the launch control, right off the clutch a little bit, and that's how quick that thing is. I'm hoping 11 seconds down the quarter mile with the standard turbo, because, certainly feels like it is. We might have to get a drag on it at some stage, but in the meantime, not much we can do, right? Now, there is a tunnel right here. It'd be rude of me not to, you know the drill. So the big question many will have is, what is the clutch like? Well, you can see, it's pretty good. Drives like factory in terms of pedal pressure and engagement, but obviously can handle more grunt, and as you saw, can handle a launch pretty well without slipping. Now, obviously when you switch from a dual mass to a single mass flywheel, you are going to get some extra vibration. That is just a fact that you can't escape. So, does this have more vibration down low? Well, a little bit, yes, but my car has a stabilizer mount, coilovers, and an exhaust that's probably a bit too loud, so it is not really all that noticeable in this car. If you had a dead stock Yaris and you changed the clutch, you would notice a little bit of extra vibration. Would it bug you? Look, my attitude is, if it does bug you, then any modification would probably bug you. So let's have a look at normal drivability. So there you have it. My drive to work is finished. Awesome car to drive with the Motec. Hard to fault, and can't wait to get this into the track and test it out properly. So our GR Yaris now has a really good split personality between a hot hatch that you can daily drive and a track weapon at the switch of a dial. Very happy with the way our GR Yaris performs, and going with the Motec and the guys at PowerTune proves that you can have factory drivability with an aftermarket ECU, as well as increasing the performance. We've now got more than 60 kilowatts more than factory, which is pretty damn impressive. So, with lockdowns in Sydney, we can't go to the track to test the car, but we are going to continue development. The car's going to go off to AGI to get a roll cage designed and developed, both a half cage and a full cage option for Yaris owners. We are also going to be installing a brake kit from V-Sport Australia, a budget-conscious one to begin with before we potentially go even further. And also, Golby's Parts are working on a turbo kit based around a Garrett G25 550 with a Turbo Smart external wastegate and a 6-boost manifold. And obviously, we can switch to a normal style Turbo Smart blower valve. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on more development from our GR Yaris.